He died while making waffles. And my parents didn't even pick up the phone. I'm Emily Lawson. I'm 36 years old, and 2 weeks ago, my husband Jake collapsed in the middle of our kitchen in Austin, Texas. He was flipping waffles for our son when he suddenly gripped the counter and said, "I don't feel right." That was the last thing he ever said. At 7:12 a.m., Jake Lawson, father, husband, baseball coach, spreadsheet nerd, king of dad jokes, was gone from this world. The paramedics said it was a massive heart attack. They tried everything. I was kneeling on the floor, still in my robe, our 9-year-old son Ben crying behind me, asking, "Mom, is Daddy okay?" And I was screaming his name, hoping sheer willpower could bring him back. It didn't. I called my parents, sobbing uncontrollably, hoping for some lifeline of comfort. My mother answered with background noise, laughter, music. "Emily, can I call you later? We're just about to cut the cake for your sister Melanie's birthday." Her tone was light, dismissive. I told her Jake had died. Her response, "That's awful, honey, but today's not the best time to talk. We'll check in tomorrow." Tomorrow? Jake wouldn't be here tomorrow. That night, Ben and I sat at the dining table where Jake had set out orange juice and butter before collapsing. I couldn't bring myself to clean it up. I lit a candle next to his empty chair and stared at it for hours while Ben curled up on the couch in Jake's hoodie. Every sound in the house reminded me of what was gone. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost the illusion that my family would show up when it mattered. My parents had always been somewhat self-involved, but I never imagined they'd ignore their daughter the day her world fell apart. The pain of losing Jake was unbearable, but what tore me open was realizing that when I reached out for the people who raised me, all I got was voicemail and silence. How do you cope when the people you thought would carry you through grief become part of the pain instead? For those of you who've buried someone you love and found yourselves grieving alone, not because you wanted to, but because the people who should have cared didn't, what did you do next? And what do you owe to people who abandon you when you need them most? Jake and I met in a way that sounds cliché, at a coffee shop near the University of Texas. I was 20, sleep-deprived, trying to finish a research paper on agricultural economics. He was 24, a graduate student in finance, sitting at the next table with a worn-out calculator and a sharp smile. He leaned over and asked if I had an extra pen. I gave him mine and forgot about the paper entirely. By the end of that semester, we were inseparable. Jake had a laugh that made strangers smile. He was the kind of man who listened more than he spoke and noticed the little things, like when I needed a break before I even said it out loud. We got married a year after I graduated. I remember my parents warning me, "You're too young to settle down, give it a few years." But I didn't need time to know. Jake wasn't just someone I wanted to grow old with. He was someone I couldn't imagine growing without. He worked his way up in a local wealth management firm, not because he was ruthless, but because he was honest. His clients trusted him. People sensed that Jake Lawson wouldn't screw them over. Not for money, not for anything. And he never did. After 5 years, we decided to try for a baby. We thought it would be simple. It wasn't. We went through 2 miscarriages and a failed round of IVF. I remember one night lying on the bathroom floor, bleeding and broken, whispering to him that maybe we weren't meant to be parents. He held me for hours and said, "Then we'll be whatever we're meant to be, together." But then, miraculously, I got pregnant with Ben. It was the hardest pregnancy imaginable. I had to stop working at 5 months. I developed preeclampsia and was placed on bed rest. Jake shifted to part-time remote work, practically overnight, without complaint. He made me breakfast every morning, tracked every baby kick in a spreadsheet, and read "Goodnight Moon" to my stomach, like it was gospel. When Ben was born, Jake cried harder than I did. I have a photo of him holding Ben, his eyes red, his smile so wide it looked painful. I keep it on my nightstand now. Some nights, it's the only thing that gets me through. For 9 incredible years, we were a unit. Jake never missed a school performance or dentist appointment. He coached Ben's Little League team, even though he knew nothing about baseball. He taught himself just to be there. But there were signs. He'd get winded walking up the stairs. He sometimes woke up with chest tightness and blamed it on stress. We thought it was the job, the pressure, life. The doctor said his blood pressure was a little high, but nothing alarming. Told him to eat better, cut back on sodium, take aspirin occasionally. We followed the advice half-heartedly. There was always time later, right? Only there wasn't. That Tuesday morning, he made waffles shaped like Texas. He danced to bad 80s music while Ben laughed at him. Then, he collapsed. I held his face in my hands and begged him to come back. But his eyes never opened. When someone's heart stops, they say you should start CPR within seconds. I did. But some hearts don't restart. Jake's didn't. And now the man who could calm any storm in me was gone. Without warning, without goodbye. And I was left holding pieces of a life that was supposed to last forever. There's no guidebook for telling your child their father has died. Ben had been at school when it happened. I couldn't reach him in time to stop the dismissal bell. My friend Caroline, who lived 2 blocks away, picked him up when I called her in a panic. I didn't even have the strength to drive. The thought of his little legs running toward our house, expecting Jake to be there, laughing in the kitchen, it crushed me. When he walked through the front door, the house felt like it was holding its breath. "Where's Dad?" he asked immediately, dropping his backpack with a loud thump. "He said he'd be home early today." I froze. The words sat on my tongue like glass shards. I had practiced them in my head, but now they refused to come out. "Ben," I said, my voice trembling, "come sit with me." We sat on the edge of the couch. I took both of his hands into mine, and I could already see it in his face. He knew something wasn't right. "Daddy got very sick this morning," I began slowly, trying not to break. "His heart stopped working, and the doctors couldn't fix it." He stared at me, confused. "You mean he's at the hospital?" "No, baby. He died." His face went blank, like a light had been turned off behind his eyes. Then his lips started to tremble. "Number, he can't. He promised. He promised we'd go to the batting cages this weekend." I didn't know what to say. I just pulled him into my chest and held him while he sobbed so hard I thought it would break his ribs. He cried until he hiccuped. Then he pulled away, wiping his face with his sleeve. "Is this a bad dream?" "I wish it was," I whispered. I would give anything to wake up from it. That night, Ben couldn't sleep in his own room. He curled up next to me in bed, wrapped in Jake's old hoodie, clutching the stuffed dinosaur Jake had given him when he was 6. He kept whispering, "I miss him already." I didn't sleep either. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ben breathe, thinking, how am I going to raise him without Jake? How am I going to do this alone? The next morning, I called my parents again. My hands shook dialing the number. I still couldn't believe their reaction the day before. My mother answered, voice cheery and rushed. "Emily, we're headed to brunch right now. What's going on?" "Mom," I said, "Jake is dead." There was silence, followed by, "You already said that." "I mean, what do you need? Have you figured out the funeral yet?" My breath caught. "I need my family," I said, barely above a whisper. "I need someone to sit with me. I need someone to be here for Ben." "Well, your father and I can't drop everything. You know this week is full. Melanie's gallery showing is on Friday, and we've already booked dinner for Saturday." I hung up before I screamed. The next few days were a blur. People started calling. Jake's coworkers, my friends from college, neighbors. They brought casseroles, offered to watch Ben, sat with me in the kitchen just so I wasn't alone. Some of them barely knew us, but they showed up. And yet, the people who should have been there first, my parents, remained absent. 3 days after Jake's death, I found myself at the funeral home picking out a casket while holding my son's hand. It was surreal. I had to choose between oak or mahogany, satin or velvet interior. None of it made sense. Jake was supposed to be alive. He was supposed to be planning our summer trip to Yellowstone, not this. Ben asked if he could write something to put inside the casket. He drew a picture of the three of us at the beach, with Jake holding his hand and the sun smiling down. On the back, he wrote, "I love you, Dad. I'll hit a home run for you." I barely held it together as I tucked it into the breast pocket of Jake's suit. The night before the funeral, I finally broke. I sat in our bathroom, door locked, lights off, and sobbed into a towel like it could muffle the grief. The guilt, the rage, the loneliness, every emotion I had shoved down came rushing out in a tidal wave. Why wasn't Jake more careful about his health? Why didn't we push the doctor harder? Why didn't I see it coming? And how the hell could my own parents act like none of this mattered? When I came out of the bathroom an hour later, Ben was waiting at the door. "Mom, I made a picture for Daddy too. Can we put it next to his head?" I nodded. "Of course we can." And in that moment, I realized Jake may be gone, but I had to stay standing. For Ben, for me, for the life we still had to live. Saturday came too quickly, the day of the funeral. Ben insisted on wearing his blue tie, because Dad said I looked grown up in it. I helped him with the knot, fighting back tears, remembering how Jake used to ruffle his hair and call him my little gentleman. We arrived at St. Paul's Chapel an hour early. I wanted time to breathe, to find a center in the storm. Jake's co-workers were already there, men in tailored suits, eyes rimmed red, women with mascara-smudged cheeks clutching tissues. One by one, they hugged me and knelt down to speak with Ben. Some shared stories about Jake, the client he stayed up all night helping, the office birthday party, where he dressed as a taco just to make people laugh. Every one of them said the same thing. He was the heart of our team. And then my parents showed up. 20 minutes late. They entered through the main aisle like it was a theater performance. My mother wore oversized sunglasses and too much perfume. My father was in a blazer he hadn't worn since my high school graduation. "Traffic was a nightmare," Mom whispered as she leaned in to kiss my cheek. "And Melanie couldn't find anything black that didn't look frumpy." Melanie, my younger sister, strutted in behind them in a black cocktail dress, better suited for a gala than a memorial. She was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. I should have been surprised. I wasn't. During the service, I sat between Ben and Jake's younger brother, Daniel, who had flown in from Portland at the last minute. Daniel never let go of Ben's hand. Their matching dimples and solemn eyes made my heart ache. When it was time for the eulogy, I almost didn't stand. My knees buckled as I made my way to the pulpit, the pages of my speech shaking in my hands. But then I looked at Ben, sitting so small and brave in the front pew, clutching a folded drawing in his lap, the one he had made for his father. His strength gave me mine. I spoke about Jake's loyalty, his weird obsession with old Western movies, his refusal to ever eat instant mashed potatoes. I shared how he once drove 6 hours just to return a wallet a stranger had left in our rental car. I talked about the way he danced in the kitchen, barefoot, with flour on his nose. But as I spoke, I caught glimpses of my family. My mother dabbed at eyes that didn't look wet. My father checked his watch. Melanie yawned. It was like we were at 2 different funerals. Mine, where the man I loved was being laid to rest, and theirs, where they were politely enduring an inconvenience before their evening plans. Afterward, we hosted a small reception at our house. Jake's co-workers brought trays of food, neighbors brought folding chairs, and the kitchen buzzed with quiet voices and shared memories. My parents, meanwhile, sat on the couch like royalty receiving condolences. My mother clinked glasses of white wine with extended relatives. My father stood near the buffet table, telling Uncle Larry about Jake's strong investment portfolio and asking if I'd received the insurance check yet. I overheard it, and it hit me like a sucker punch to the chest. My husband had been gone less than a week, and my father was already measuring his death in dollars. I walked into the kitchen, leaned against the sink, and stared at the backyard, where Jake used to play catch with Ben. I felt nauseous. My hands trembled so hard, I had to grip the counter. Daniel walked in, gently handing me a plate. "You've barely eaten." "I can't," I whispered. "They're already talking about the money." His eyes hardened. "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. "Number not today. Today is for Jake, not them." That night, after everyone had gone, and Ben had finally fallen asleep curled around Jake's pillow, I sat alone on the back porch. The air was cool, and the stars were out. Jake always said you could see them better from our side of town. I looked up and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't protect today the way I wanted to. I should have shut it down, all of it, but I couldn't fight everyone at once." And then, quietly, "I miss you so much, Jake." Behind me, the wind rustled the chimes he'd hung himself, little copper pipes that clinked like laughter. I don't know if he heard me, but in that moment, I believed he did. 3 days after the funeral, just as the numbness was beginning to harden into something colder, something resembling survival, my doorbell rang. Ben was at school. I had just sat down with a pile of health insurance paperwork and a lukewarm cup of coffee when I looked through the peephole. It was my parents. My father stood straight, tugging at the hem of his golf shirt. My mother adjusted her scarf in the reflection of the glass door. Neither of them looked like they were here to grieve. Still, I opened the door. Habit, maybe, or hope, misplaced as it was. "We thought we'd check in," Mom said, walking in without waiting to be invited. "Is Ben at school? Good, we can talk openly." There it was, the first crack in the mask. I followed them into the living room, where they sat down like guests in a vacation rental. I poured them coffee, as if this were some polite social call, not a visit to a grieving widow. Dad cleared his throat. "Emily, we've been thinking a lot about your situation." I blinked. "My situation?" "Your financial situation," Mom clarified. "Now that Jake's gone." I stared. The words didn't land right at first. They floated, disconnected, until I felt their weight. "Go on," I said quietly. "Well," my father said, leaning forward like he was about to pitch a business deal, "your mother and I are getting older. Retirement isn't what it used to be. And with healthcare costs rising, we were hoping—" He paused, like searching for the right marketing language, "that you might consider helping out." "Helping out?" "We're not asking for everything," he said. "Just a portion of the life insurance. Maybe 40 or 50%. That should still leave you and Ben in a very secure position." My hands went cold around the coffee mug. 50%. "It's only fair," Mom added quickly. "We supported you through college, paid for your wedding, helped with your down payment." "My husband is dead," I whispered. "Exactly," Dad said. "And he was very successful. It's practical planning, family supporting family." My heart pounded in my ears. "Where was that support when I called you the morning he died? When Ben and I were falling apart? When I had to plan a funeral alone?" Mom flinched. "We were trying to hold it together for Melanie's sake. Her birthday party." "Her birthday party?" I interrupted, my voice cracking. "You couldn't leave a party, but you can come now and ask for Jake's money?" "Don't be emotional, Emily," Dad said. "You're not thinking clearly." "Don't!" I stood, suddenly furious. "Don't you dare tell me how to feel." Mom stood too, reaching toward me. "We're just trying to make sure everyone is taken care of." "No," I said, stepping back. "You're trying to profit off your son-in-law's death." The rage in me wasn't hot. It was cold, ice spreading through my bones. I had bent over backward my whole life to earn their affection. I had tolerated the favoritism, the dismissiveness. But this was theft wrapped in a smile. "You need to leave," I said. "Emily," Dad said sharply, "we are your parents. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I snapped. "Jake made sure Ben and I would be okay, and you don't get to take that from us." He opened his mouth, but the look on my face must have stopped him. Without another word, they left. I stood at the door, shaking. Minutes passed before I realized I was still holding the coffee mug, my fingers gripping the ceramic like a lifeline. That night, when I picked Ben up from school, he looked unusually quiet. "Grandma and Grandpa were at our house today, weren't they?" he asked softly. I nodded. "You saw them?" "From the window. Did they bring something for us?" I paused. "No, honey. They came to talk to me about some things." "About Dad's money?" he asked. I froze. "Why do you think that?" "I heard Grandpa at the funeral," he said, eyes down. "He told Uncle Mark we'd be set for life now, because Dad died." That sentence, from the mouth of my son, felt like someone had emptied a bag of stones into my chest. "I would give all the money in the world to have Dad back," Ben whispered. I pulled over. I couldn't drive anymore. "I would too," I said, reaching across the car to hold his hand. "Every penny." That night, after Ben had fallen asleep in Jake's old t-shirt again, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling. The pressure in my chest hadn't let up since my parents left. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was anger, betrayal, disbelief. The next morning, I called Daniel. "They actually asked for half the insurance money?" he said, stunned. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," I said flatly. "They weren't even subtle." He swore under his breath. "Jake would have lost it." I nodded, biting my lip. I wish he were here. He always saw through their games. Daniel went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Did you check the bottom drawer in his office?" "What?" "The one with the lock. He told me a while back that if anything ever happened, you'd find instructions there. He was worried. About his health. About your parents." I hung up and went straight to the office. The drawer was still locked, the tiny brass key tucked inside Jake's old desk organizer. I hadn't opened it since the day he died. I couldn't even look at the room without choking up. But now my hands moved with purpose. Inside was a plain envelope labeled in Jake's handwriting, "Emily, in case you ever need it." I sat down, took a breath, opened it. The letter was dated 6 months earlier. Jake must have written it after his last checkup. "Hey Em, if you're reading this, it means something went wrong. I didn't want to scare you, so I kept things light, but I knew the risks. That's why I updated everything. The will, the insurance, the trust. I made sure you and Ben are secure." I paused, already crying. "There's one more thing. Your dad came to me twice asking for business opportunities. It wasn't subtle. I said no, and I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to hurt you, so I'm telling you now. Don't let them touch a cent. That money is for Ben, not to fix your dad's bad investments, not to pay for Melanie's art career. I love you. Protect our son. Be strong. I know you will." I reread that paragraph at least 5 times. Jake had known. He had seen what I hadn't wanted to see. And even in death, he'd tried to shield me from the worst of it. The next day, I called Thomas, Jake's friend, and our estate lawyer. He reviewed everything calmly, patiently. "Your father has no legal grounds. Jake's documents are clear. You're the sole beneficiary. And the trust for Ben is locked until he turns 25. It can only be used for education and essential care." "Can they contest it?" I asked. He shook his head. "They'd lose, and any attempt would only hurt their credibility." That gave me some peace, but it didn't ease the ache. Jake had planned for everything, even betrayal, and now it was my job to carry out his wishes. When I got home, Ben was coloring at the dining table. I sat down beside him and watched for a while. "What are you drawing?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "A shield, like a real one, to protect us." My throat tightened. Jake had already given us that shield. Now it was my turn to hold it up. After the meeting with Thomas, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Clarity. My parents weren't going to stop. They weren't embarrassed by their behavior. They felt entitled. And I had spent most of my life confusing obligation with love. That Sunday, as I was setting the table for dinner, Ben walked into the kitchen, holding a manila envelope. "I want to go with you next time," he said. "To Grandma and Grandpa's?" He nodded. I made something. I hesitated. Ben, it's going to be a hard conversation. I know, he said. But I have something to say too, like Dad would. There was no convincing him otherwise. When we arrived at my parents' house, the air was thick with tension. They had gathered several family members, aunts, uncles, even Melanie, perched on the armrest scrolling through her phone. We just want to talk this through, my father began. As a family, I stood behind Ben, my hand on his shoulder. If it's about the money, let's be clear. Jake left everything to us for a reason. My mother sighed. We understand. But after all we've done, that's when Ben stepped forward. Envelope clutched tightly. I made you something, he said, his voice small but steady. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and handed it to my father. It was drawn like an invoice. At the top, bill for love and support, in Ben's handwriting. Below were 4 lines. Being there when Dad died. $0. Helping Mom when she was sad. $0. Asking how I'm doing. $0. Being good grandparents. Priceless, but not provided. At the bottom, he had written, Total owed, $0. This is what you earned. The room went silent. My father stared at the paper, his hands trembling. My mother covered her mouth. Even Melanie put her phone down. Ben didn't cry. He just looked up and said, Dad always said when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Then he turned and walked to the door. I followed, barely holding it together. We drove home in silence until Ben whispered, Was that okay? I squeezed his hand. It was perfect. In 5 minutes, my son had said what I hadn't been able to in 35 years. He gave them truth, plain and unpolished. And the quiet that followed was louder than any argument I could have made. In the days after the confrontation at my parents' house, the silence was almost shocking. No texts, no calls, no passive-aggressive emails, nothing. And it was peaceful. For the first time since Jake died, I wasn't spending energy managing other people's expectations. I could just be broken, grieving, healing, without performing politeness for people who hadn't earned it. Ben seemed lighter, too. He slept through the night. He asked to ride his bike again. One morning, he even laughed while watching one of Jake's old home videos on the TV. The air in our home felt different, less suffocating. Daniel stayed with us another week before flying home. The night before he left, we sat on the back porch with cups of tea, watching the porch light flicker. You did the right thing, he said. Jake would be proud of you, of both of you. I nodded, staring at the stars. It still hurts, though, not just losing Jake, but realizing my parents never really saw me. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Maybe they never wanted to. Maybe you outgrew the version of you they could control. He was right. For most of my life, I had shrunk myself to fit into their idea of what a daughter should be. Grateful, quiet, giving. I had twisted myself into their mold, and when I finally broke free, they didn't know what to do with me. But now, for the first time, I didn't feel like the selfish one for saying no. I felt free. That weekend, Ben and I went to the park with sandwiches and a blanket. We watched clouds, played catch, and talked about nothing important. And everything important. At one point, he said, Mom, it feels like we're getting stronger. I smiled. We are, baby. We really are. The absence of chaos was not loneliness. It was space. Space to breathe. Space to grieve. Space to rebuild. It had been nearly a month since the confrontation. I hadn't blocked my parents, but I also hadn't reached out. Neither had they. At first, I thought the quiet was tactical, part of another guilt trip. But as the days turned into weeks, it started to feel like something else. Maybe shame, maybe surrender. Maybe, for the first time, they realized their control over me was gone. One afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a handwritten letter, 6 pages long. Dear Emily and Ben, it began, we've spent the last few weeks reflecting on what happened. Not just the confrontation, but everything that led to it. There was no flattery, no manipulation, just acknowledgement. They admitted that their behavior had been selfish, that they had prioritized money, appearances, and pride over love, over family. We failed you, and we failed Jake's memory, my father had written on the final page. There is no excuse, only a hope that, in time, we can earn back a place in your lives. There was no ask, no mention of money, no pressure for contact. It caught me completely off guard. I showed the letter to Daniel that evening on a video call. He read it twice before leaning back in his chair. It's not nothing, he said cautiously, but it's not everything either. I don't know what to do, I admitted. You don't have to do anything right now, he said. Just let it sit. Let time show you if the letter was a one-time performance or the start of something real. He was right. Again. The next day, Ben and I were walking home from school when he looked up at me and asked, "Do you think they're sorry?" "I think they might be," I answered. "But sorry only matters if it comes with change." Ben nodded like he understood more than his 9 years should allow. "I think Dad would want us to give them a chance, but not too many." That night, I wrote a short note in return. "Thank you for your letter. Ben and I are still healing. I appreciate your honesty, but I need to see consistency before we even think about rebuilding anything. For now, please continue respecting our space." Emily, I mailed it the next morning, and it felt good. Not like closure exactly, but like a gate with a lock. I had the key, and no one else could touch it without my permission. Later that week, Ben taped his drawing, the invoice, to the back of his bedroom door. When I asked him why, he said, "So I remember what we deserve." I smiled. That's exactly why we keep it. Spring arrived in Austin quietly. The bluebonnets bloomed across the edge of the park where Jake used to jog. Ben and I returned to our weekend picnic ritual: turkey sandwiches, apple juice, and long walks down winding trails. But everything was different now. We weren't trying to pretend life was normal anymore. We were building a new one that honored Jake without being crushed by his absence. Ben had grown in ways I hadn't expected. He started helping pack his own lunch, checking the mail, brushing his teeth without reminders. Sometimes I'd catch him talking to Jake's photo on the shelf. A quiet check-in, like nothing had changed. One Saturday morning, he walked into the kitchen and said, "I think we should do something for Dad's birthday this year." "Like what?" I asked. "A celebration. Not sad, just something he'd love." So we planned it. Nothing big. Just friends, neighbors, a barbecue in our backyard. Everyone brought something Jake loved: peach cobbler, smoked brisket, bad puns. We played his favorite playlist. Yes, it included 3 Kenny Rogers songs. And Ben gave a short speech he wrote himself. "My dad taught me that being strong doesn't mean never crying," he said. "It means protecting people you love, even if it's hard." I think he'd be proud of us. And we're proud of him. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Later that night, as I sat with Ben under the porch lights, he leaned against my shoulder and whispered, "We're doing okay, huh?" I wrapped my arm around him. "Yeah, buddy, we really are." A week later, I got another letter from my parents. This one shorter, handwritten again. "We're still working on ourselves. We're seeing a therapist. We haven't given up. We don't expect anything in return, but we wanted you to know." There was no push for contact, just a report from a distance, like people who'd finally understood they'd lost the right to rush reconciliation. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was hope. But for now, I didn't feel pressured to decide. Because for the first time since Jake died, I wasn't surviving. I was living. I was showing Ben, and myself, that grief didn't end you. It shaped you. That the people who abandon you don't get to define you. And that love, real love, leaves behind more than memories. It leaves you braver, wiser, stronger. Jake wasn't in our house anymore, or in the chair at the head of the table, or on the bleachers at Ben's games. But he was in the way Ben stood taller now, in the way I said no without guilt, in the shield we had learned to raise, together. And that was more powerful than presence. That was legacy. In moments of loss, we often discover who truly stands with us, and who only stood nearby when it was convenient. This story reminds us that grief does more than break us. It reveals, with painful clarity, the true nature of those around us. For older adults who have weathered their share of betrayals and goodbyes, Emily's journey offers a powerful truth. Boundaries are not acts of cruelty, they are acts of self-preservation. Her story teaches us that loyalty cannot be demanded through titles like parent or sibling. It must be earned through presence, compassion, and care. It also reminds us that love doesn't end with death. Real love, like Jake's, builds a legacy of protection, values, and quiet strength that lives on through the people we shape and protect. In our later years, we reflect more often on what we leave behind. This story challenges us to ask, are we remembered for what we gave or for what we took? For the love we offered or the expectations we imposed? It's never too late to change what kind of legacy we leave, and it's never wrong to protect your peace, even from those who once held your trust.